Thank you, Keith, for joining us today. How are you doing?
I am great. It is a rare home day for me. Usually I'm out on the road, so I'm home. I'm hanging out with the fuzzballs and with my wife, and so it's all good. It's really a beautiful day in Oregon. It's going to be 80. I'm going to go out in the sun a little bit, and had we not needed good audio, I'd probably be sitting on the patio now. So those
Nice.
rare moments that come along, you take advantage of.
I agree. Well, let's get started with a little background on you. I know that you have served in the U.S. Army and the Texas Army National Guard. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Please tell us a little bit about how you actually got into the detailing industry. What was interesting to you in this industry?
Well, it really wasn't an intentional thing. And I think a lot of folks who get into our industry, initially, it's not an intentional thing. For a lot of guys who do it as a profession now, they may have started because they needed a job. For me, it was part of a job. I was doing fire and flood restoration, and we had a suicide in the car, and I got the assignment to do the restoration on the car. So that was kind of my first foray into it. And then shortly after, I left that part of the restoration business and ended up going to work with a guy named Bud Abraham, who a lot of folks in our industry know. And started with him doing some sales, inside sales, outside sales. And it just worked into, with my engineering background, we had some changes in our production side. So I dove in on that, but didn't stop doing sales. And before I knew it, I was kind of all over the place and doing training, and it's just kind of grown from there. So, yeah.
Well, now being an owner of Detail Plus, I know that being in the Army and having leadership roles was probably an influence. How do those coincide now?
Well, I really think the military background for me has been extremely influential and extremely beneficial. When I first joined, there wasn't a lot of the things we see now. People thanking people for their service, that kind of stuff, just didn't happen. I won't say we're still in the hangover of Vietnam, but we were a little bit in that mode where just military was the military, and if you were in, and people didn't really pay much attention to it. But what I got out of it was a lot of leadership education, and I got a laboratory to really practice some of those things. A lot of the training people get, they go to a leadership class, and then they're just expected to kind of execute that leadership, or you maybe never use it. I got to use it on a daily basis in the military. And I made a ton of mistakes. I did a lot of dumb things. Fortunately, nobody ever got hurt, so hey, benefit there. But I learned a lot about group dynamics and how to get along with folks. And the active Army is different than the National Guard and the Reserve. And people will say, yeah, they're less than soldiers. And I would argue they're more than, because we're doing something 26, 28 days a month, and then we show up and we got to do the Army thing. And we've got to get all the standards that the active guys do in the same 2.5 days a month. The other part is you really learn how to balance. You learn a work-life balance. You learn how to manage your time. But more importantly, you learn how to lead people from a distance. And you also learn that there are a lot of intelligent people in the world. And just because their rank may be lower than yours in the military doesn't mean they're not smart. I mean, I had a specialist that worked for me when I was a young buck sergeant. The guy was a law school graduate, but he took advantage of the Army, got his education, had no intention of doing anything with the Army, and was riding out his time. And so you learn not to treat people by necessarily their rank only, but also to learn how to influence someone like that. Because a 30-year-old lawyer doesn't influence the same way as a 19-year-old private. And so you've got to grow up and learn how to communicate. And so in the industry, it's paid huge dividends, with the Detail Association and even with Detail Plus. How do you lead a client who runs a multi-million-dollar operation toward the goal that they want, but they may not quite understand how to get there? So tremendously valuable education for me.
Very understandable. I have one more personal question, and then I promise to get to some automotive questions.
Sure.
So rumor has it that you did some detail work on Air Force One. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, you can't really, well, we should turn this way. So that is my sponsor photo. So every year that you sponsor or work with the Air Force One, they send you one of those great things. I've got four of them now, three of them. It was selected for the team for the fourth time, but COVID kind of canceled our event. Yeah, so I'm fortunate enough to be a member of what's called the Detail Mafia, which is headed by Rennie Doyle, and he is the, by presidential decree, the official detailer of Air Force One. And so that plane behind me, which you can't really see, is the first Air Force One. That's Kennedy's. That's actually Eisenhower Kennedy's jet. That's the jet that was in Dallas on that day, and it's in the Boeing Museum, a flight up in Seattle. So every year, about 60 of the best detailers on the planet, and me and a couple other guys, show up there, and we detail on that plane along with the other 17 aircraft outside at the museum. So tremendous honor, a huge project, and a lot of fun. Again, that opportunity to work with 60 business owners who are at all levels of success, size and shape, and different. And I get to do that plane, and the plane's cool. But what's really cool about that event is every night, because we go back to the hotel, we sit around the fire pit outside, we have some dinner, and you get to learn from some guys and gals who are really the most successful people in the industry at what they do. And so I get a ton out of that event. Not sure why they keep inviting me, but I keep saying yes, and I always will.
Well, you must be doing something right. That's interesting. Okay, so on to dealerships. We know that right now is an extremely busy time for dealerships, both in the front end and the service side. What are some opportune times dealerships can connect their customers and detailers?
Well, I think it really is at every opportunity. There isn't one car on one dealership that doesn't get touched by the detail department, whether that's a wash for a service car, or just a car that's on the lot, or it's a detail for a used car, or it's a new car PDI or something. Almost every single car in a dealership, and this is the only department that does it, is touched by the detail shop. Now, to varying degrees and to varying success levels, but so there's never not an opportunity. But I think if you were looking at the day-to-day interactions a dealership has, obviously a clean car for a test drive is one thing, but that's not the bulk of who goes to a car dealership. The bulk of who goes there are the people who go to get service. So if I were to pick one, I would say your touch point is your service rider and your service lane, because that's where you have an opportunity to get somebody who's willing to do two things you really need. One, give up their car because they're turning it in for service, or they're willing to have it in for service. And two, they're already spending a nominal amount of money on a repair. So it's almost the opportunity for, would you like fries with that? Which is, while it's here, would you like to get it cleaned to some degree? Whether that's a wash and a wax or a complete detail or something to that effect, you have an opportunity to review the vehicle, look at its needs, to determine how you can help the customer and make an upsell. So if I were to pick one spot, it's on the service drive. It really is.
I agree with you. Most dealerships you see have a dedicated space for detailing, like a dedicated workspace?
So I was on the road last week, as we were just talking about. And yeah, I mean, I had yet to be in a dealership recently that don't have a dedicated space for this. Now, how it's used and to what extent it varies, again, with the plethora of dealership types we have. The bulk do it in-house, but some, third-party contract that out. Or they just use it as a what we would call a spiff or a quick hand wash area. And then some dealerships have gone full blown and have a conveyorized car wash and a detail shop. So, but to varying degrees, they almost all have some form of a detail space. Whether they use it or they third party vendor it out, it is used.
Is there a certain spot where maybe, if a dealer is interested in either upgrading their space, or if they don't have a space and they want to get, more information on that, can you direct them where they can maybe get some content or success stories on other dealerships that are making an impact?
well, not to toot my own horn, but and come to detailplus.com. That's kind of what we do, is help them build out those facilities. I think, they've got to decide internally as a business. It's like anything else. Is this something we want to take on, own, and manage? Too often in the industry, we see detail shops that are run as a less than shop. In other words, detailing is often looked at as a money loser. And so if you intend to turn your dealership detail program into something of value, whether that's assuming that you're going to increase sales value on used cars or turn it into a retail service option, then you want to invest the space and the time in it. If that's not where you're going, I think you have to really evaluate your business first. But there's always a space in a dealership. A lot of times I've actually seen dealerships eat the detail space to use it for more service space. And again, what that tells you is very clear line. Hey, we're looking for revenue producing square footage. And if we can't produce revenue there, we look at other options. And so I really think if you're going to invest as a dealer, you want to look at it as a money gaining opportunity. So it's got to be a profit center. Now, what your definition of profit is and how you get there will depend on what the dealer's perspective is. Very few look at a well-detailed car and go, I could sell that for $1,000 more now, and then attribute some of that revenue toward the car value or the car revenue. They know it's there, and I think the intuitive part is there. But to look at it as a net gain, they look at the detail department and they say, "Wow, there's not revenue coming in, but we're putting revenue out," because there's no real way to quantify vehicle value improvement. There is a way to quantify retail sales service. So there is something to that. And there is a amount of money given for a new car prep. So there is some revenue to attribute to detail. But you've got to be really, I think, committed to doing something positive with it in the dealership. Otherwise, it falls by the wayside and it doesn't become what you want it to be.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that you have to look at it as kind of a long-term thing too, because, if I'm buying a car and it's, detailed and looks nice and it's clean, then, I'm going to be more likely to go back to that dealership because, they've taken such good care of their things. And then, on another hand, as a consumer, if I can go into a dealership, get some service work done, and then also pay extra to get my car detailed and have them really make it look great, it saves me a trip somewhere else. And, I'm going to continue to come back for that service. So
you are. And, the other part that goes with that is if you're going to get that service elsewhere, that's a greater investment in time. There's an opportunity to service a car and clean it that they've already committed the time. So to you as a consumer, the value is already built in. If I can leave my car, kind of one-stop shopping, right? So if I can leave my car and get it done and get it back, then I've gotten more value out of that experience. And I think it really is a value proposition. In a busy world today, that's kind of what you want. I've always loved the fact when I owned BMWs that I always got a car back that was clean, because it's part of the requirement for them in the service drive to have the car washed and vacuumed and turned back over to you. Is it a full detail? No, but it's certainly part of the owner experience. And I think the service experience could use a little boost like that.
I think that customer experience is such a hot topic right now. And I interview plenty of dealers every week. And, that's one of the things, especially after COVID in 2020. And, what can we do to retain our customers? And, to be able to add services in-house like this is key.
For them though, and the dealers, you talk to a lot of them, it's also about the scoring though. And so again, this is where detailing done right is a huge, score improvement or score opportunity, but it's also a risk. And we understand that, that's one of the things I do want to let people know. There's always a risk in anything you do. And if you're willing to put in risk mitigation, another thing I learned from the military, we do big things on risk mitigation. We spend a lot of effort in examining what are the benefits versus the the drawbacks. You've got to be committed. If you're going to run a detail shop and sell services for profit, you've got to be committed. But one thing I found out about dealers over the last 20 years is they have no problem committing if they believe in it. So I think it's the next thing, and I know we'll probably talk a little more about why I think that's the next thing in the dealer market, but it is the next big thing to come in the dealer market.
While we're on the subject, let's go ahead and talk about that. Just trends that you're seeing and ways that you feel like that's going to help the automotive industry in the next few years. There's going to be a lot of changes. Electric. I mean, just the way that our industry is going. What trends in your industry do you see, and how are they positive? Do you see any negatives?
Well, I think there's a number of trends. I think one of the first trends I see is consolidation. And that's good and bad. Again, economies of scale being what they are. We've seen it in the car wash business. There are now some very large national chains beginning to continue to grow. Consolidation is a good thing. I think it brings the level sometimes up of washes. The negative is that they tend to operate on a very similar footprint. And I don't mean that as in the property layout, but the kind of the operational mindset. So a lot of times that you see washes that have full serve or detail in them tend to end up going to be express. So I see that happening. But I also see a vacuum there. And nature doesn't like a vacuum. So what we see is the retail shops in the detail industry have exploded. They are more fantastic, more capable, more professional than they've ever been. We now see young entrepreneurs who are business people as well as detailers getting into that industry. And they are sinking their claws into it, and they're not giving up that territory. And they are outperforming just about any other opportunity out there to compete in the detail market. If you really want a great detail, today the best place to go is a retail shop that is well suited and outfitted and educated, because they're investing in their craft and they're investing in the industry. And it shows in every aspect. And the other thing I see with the dealer market is they're running out of revenue sources. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we started to see a lot of the dealers really close up and bring in the body shop. It didn't always work that you had a body shop and a dealership. Now most do, or most large groups do. We saw the quick lube industry kind of, I won't say absorb back into the dealer market, but the dealer market looked at that and said, man, there's a quick lube on every corner. Why aren't we doing something with that business? And so what we start to see now is that a lot of them have a fast service lane. Well, where are the revenue sources now? And what we're seeing in the dealer market is revenue sources on site and service drive are going away a little bit, because oil changes are further apart, and you're not doing transmission flushes as often, and those kind of services. So and electric cars are along. So we're not even in some cases doing motor work. We're doing less of that service work. So the service opportunities are changing tremendously, and in some cases they're losing opportunity for revenue. So where do you go next? You've already brought the body shop back in. You've already brought the quick lube back in. The next logical step is to look around your dealership and say, what else can we do here? And more correctly, I would tell them, it's what else are we doing here that we could be doing better or turn into a revenue source? And that's the detail shop. And that's why I say in the next 10 years, we'll see the boom there. And the reason for that is because the retail detail shops are showing them the way. They are providing a concierge service. They're providing a top level outcome. And even more important than that, the detail shops today have a tool to make more revenue, which is ceramic coatings. So it used to be you detail a car, you get to a certain level, maybe 4, 5, 6 hours of labor in it. It might be $350, $400 for a detail. But the added value of a long-term ceramic coating for the paint protection and the interior, both fabric and leather, can add upwards of $700 to $800 in ticket price. So now that $400 detail is a $1,200 detail. And there's revenue to be had there. And the dealers, I think, will begin to see that. Now, again, it's how do we capitalize and how do we do it right? Because as everybody knows, you can always start something, but if you do it wrong, it really it can be kind of the death knell for opportunity in the future. So doing it right is really the key part there.
I agree with you. Detailing is here to stay. The service portion of it, it's going to change. It's going to change dramatically. So if you can have like a staple that's in your dealership that a customer knows about and feels comfortable with, then I think that's going to bring you in. As a dealer, what would you recommend as far as marketing for that portion of their dealership?
I would say don't go big, go small. The tendency with detailing is to offer the full service. Don't offer the full service. Offer a decontamination and a clay or a sealant program. Offer an express service. What we have to remember in the dealership environment is it is a sum total opportunity. So if we're going to go with, would you like fries with that? Just to quote McDonald's, I'll give full credit where credit's due. The would you like fries with that immediately kind of puts you in the position of there's something else happening to the car, which means you don't have it all day for the detail shop. You have it all day, but you have to now budget the time of where does that vehicle land and on what property and how do I move it around. So trying to complete a 4-hour detail service on a car that needs 6 hours of service work doesn't work. So you've got to do things that are manageable, that you can get good outcomes on without a lot of infrastructure investment and without a lot of overdeveloped training. Complication is always a challenge. So we want to keep it simple, we want to keep it clean, and we want to keep it tight. So start with 2 things: a full interior clean and probably a decontamination and protection program, because those 2 things are relatively minimal time investment on staff. They are easy to implement because you have most of those tools already on hand. So it's really just designing a program and implementing it, and making sure you've got a few folks on hand to train it, because we have to realize we're going to be doing this service either first thing in the morning before the car gets into service because it's waiting, or at the end of the day after it's out of service. So we have to realize the surge times and the load that puts on our programs, but don't start big. And I think that's where most dealers have had their frustration. Well, we used to offer retail detailing, but it was so bad, or we couldn't do it right, or again, it's eating the elephant a bite at a time. Let's take a couple of bites out of the elephant here, do some entry-level programs that you can sell that are palatable. If you're coming in for a $400 brake service or something to that effect, 25% more may be a little high, another $100, but $50 to $60 in a service that we can invest a half-hour labor in and not much more in material because we already have it on hand is really a palatable thing for both the consumer and for the dealer to be able to execute.
That's great information. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, and really feel like you're making an impact on our industry. So I think you gave our audience quite a few good nuggets to take away and to apply at their dealership. And like you had mentioned before, for more content, we could head to your website. Can you just repeat that website again?
Sure, real easy, detailplus.com, and we spell out the plus. So detailplus.com. And you guys can reach me there, or Keith at detailplus.com, and would love to talk to any dealer. We do build full-blown detail systems and equipment. We do pressure washers, we do wash bays, but we also do training. And we have a very well-developed training program. I have an excellent, director of training. Even though I still go out and do training myself, I do have a gentleman who does our training for us, and he's a Hall of Fame detailer with the International Detail Association. So you're still getting quality folks, and we want to help you guys improve because we realize the rising tide, lifts all boats, and it's long been a goal at Detail Plus to kind of help the industry both improve its image, but also to improve its productivity and its profitability.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate your time today.
Got it. Thanks for having me, Susan.